Deepak, how did you manage to basically educate a population, help change conservative Western medicine to an equally important but different way to address some of the same issues, the most important and most single-handedly create the field of mind-body medicine? You're one of the greatest contributors to it. You come to the States in the 1970s. You and Sanjiv go in different directions. Sanjiv basically goes up to Harvard, and you just did not stop with your persistence. And you basically changed the belief of what medicine was viewed in the States. How?
Several factors in hindsight, okay? So I specialized, Sanjiv went to gastroenterology, and I did endocrinology, which, those of you who don't know, it's the study of hormones. And then for a short while, when I was at the VA hospital, I was rotating at Tufts under Dr. Seymour Reichlin, who was the president of the Endocrine Society at that time. And he was a neuroendocrinologist. He was the president of the Endocrine Society of America. And he was just like Sanjiv said, we had brilliant mentors. He was absolutely brilliant in those days, and he was identifying hormones that we didn't know too much about at that time. Hormones in the hypothalamus, like thyroid trophin stimulating hormone, like growth factors, etc. I had a colleague at that time. Her name was Candice Burt. She later went on to become the chief of brain chemistry at the NIH. She's now at Georgetown University. She identified something called peptide T, if you know anything about it or not. But her boss won the Nobel Prize, Saul Snyder, for identifying neurochemicals. And one day, Candice said to me, you know these things that we're looking at, because there was a new technique, this was called radioimmunoassay. Dr. Rosalind Yalow, who was a VA physician, and actually won the Nobel Prize for discovering this technique. So all we did as fellows and residents was keep measuring these chemicals. And one day she said to me, you know, these are the molecules of emotion. So I don't know if there was a bestseller called The Molecules of Emotion by Candice Burt. I wrote the foreword to it. And it was a huge book. And nobody had used that term, molecules of emotion. And so that was a little bit of insight that whatever happens in the mind is registered in the brain. You can't have a mental event without a brain representation. How could you? After all, the brain is what mediates the event. And the brain representation is in the form of an electrochemical event. And then there's nothing that happens in the brain that is not registered in the body. In fact, what we found was that these chemicals, neuropeptides, there were receptors to them in the cells of the body, immune cells, T cells, B cells, in the stomach. So, you know, now suddenly the expression, I have a gut feeling, made sense, because the gut was responding to molecules of emotion. Now, Sanjiv will tell you that the gut makes the same chemicals that the brain does, the same neurochemistry. So this was the scientific background, okay, that the body is a network of information, and the information is mental, okay, it's from consciousness. That's a whole different story, what consciousness is. But then as a physician, any physician will tell you, you can have two patients who get the same treatment, who see the same doctor, have the same illness, and they have different outcomes. You know, our prognosis, what we call prognosis, is a bell-shaped curve, and there are people on this side, and there are people on this side, and although you can accurately make a diagnosis, you can never accurately make a prognosis. It's like saying the temperature today in New York is 62, because the average temperature in New York is 62. It doesn't make sense. Or saying your income is $100,000 because you come from Manhattan and the average income or the median income it doesn't tell me anything about you. So, you know, I was thinking to myself, why do patients respond unpredictably? Even though we can statistically get some idea, but for the individual you can't. Just like for the individual particle, you cannot predict when it will pop in and out of the quantum vacuum. In fact, no individual event in the universe has a cause. This I learned much later. Okay, so this was all scientifically going on. I started to write the experiences of my patients. Nobody would accept that in a medical journal. I started to write them in a popular book. Nobody would accept that. So this is, one of those very strange things. I read an ad in the New York Times by a vanity publisher called Vanity Press, not Vanity, Vantage Press. I paid $5,000, got 100 books published myself with the experiences of my patients. It was called Creating Health, the Mind-Body Connection. Nobody had used that word expression, the mind-body connection. Somebody convinced the Harvard Coop to put it in their window. Next thing I get a call from an agent. She says, why don't you have a publisher? I said, I tried. She said, let me get you one. And it was Houghton Mifflin, the same publisher that today's book, okay? Houghton Mifflin in Boston. Next thing I get a call from an agent in New York. I get a call from Jackie Onassis, of all the people. And she said, we want to get you as a publisher for a New York publisher. And the rest, what I found was I could make a case for the public, that I couldn't make a case for my own profession. And that started, in a sense, the movement.